He was the child teachers praised, the one who sat still, raised his hand, colored inside the lines. The boy who never talked back, never challenged anything, never questioned why. His parents called him a blessing. His neighbors called him polite. His report cards called him promising. He was the kind of kid others were compared to. At school, he was rewarded for being what the system liked: quiet, focused, obedient. And so he learned early what worked. Be good, be nice, be what they want, never ask why, just do what's expected. According to Pew Research in 2021, 83% of American parents say they'd rather their child be obedient than creative. That is not a parenting choice. That is a cultural design. So when it was time to choose a university, he didn't ask what excited him. He asked what would look best on a resume. He didn't ask what would make him feel alive. He asked what would make him look responsible. He chose something safe, a practical degree, one with job security, business, engineering, computer science, not because he loved it, but because it made sense. Everyone nodded in approval. His parents were proud. His friends admired him. No one asked what he really wanted, not even himself. He graduated, got a job, started climbing the ladder. He was never late, always said yes, took on the extra hours, stayed quiet in meetings, tried to be useful, reliable, humble. He did what a man was supposed to do. He bought a modest house, married a good woman, had children, paid the bills, smiled for the Christmas photo, posted it with a caption about gratitude. He didn't chase crazy dreams. He didn't disappoint his parents. He didn't disappoint society. He was the model adult, the kind of man HR departments love: predictable, efficient, respectable. He followed the plan, the unwritten script that so many follow without ever reading it aloud. Study, work, settle down, contribute, retire, fade out. He took pride in never straying. He took pride in being safe. He took pride in never getting lost. But maybe he was never really on his own path to begin with, because he never asked where the path led. He never asked who laid the bricks. He never asked if it was even his road at all. His days looked like progress. His nights looked like purpose. But deep down, something felt off. A quiet voice, easy to ignore, kept whispering, "Is this all there is?" Psychologists have a name for this: the default mode life. It means living by habit, by programming, by fear. It means following the route with the least resistance, even when it leads to nowhere. Not because you're weak, not because you're stupid, but because the system rewards people who comply more than it rewards people who think. Be obedient, be responsible, be productive, be what others expect. He was never punished, never told no, never beaten down, because no one had to force him. He enforced himself. He built the walls. He closed the doors. He locked himself inside a version of success that was handed to him. Handed to him by people who never lived it either, and he called it freedom. That's the quiet tragedy. Not that someone took his freedom, but that he forgot he ever had it. And if you're listening now and you feel a slight discomfort rising in your chest, not panic, not sadness, just a quiet feeling that something isn't quite right, then maybe this story isn't just about him. Maybe it's about you too. So how does this happen? How does a man live an entire life without ever realizing he was never steering it? Etienne de la Boétie had an answer, and he wrote it 500 years ago. He said the most dangerous form of control is not force, it's consent. It's not the dictator who keeps you obedient. It's the inner voice that tells you obedience is noble. The most powerful tyrannies are the ones that never have to lift a finger, because their subjects police themselves. And that's what happened to him. He was never dragged into servitude. He was raised into it, smiled into it, rewarded into it. He was taught to be a good boy, then a good student, then a good employee, then a good citizen. At no point did he say yes, because at no point did he even know there was a no. La Boétie called it voluntary servitude, when people accept their own chains because they've been conditioned to call them virtues. And there's no conditioning system more effective than school. According to OECD data, over 70% of school assessments measure compliance and memorization. Only 8% encourage creative or critical thinking, which means from age 5, most people are not learning how to think. They're learning how to obey. He was rewarded for staying quiet, for writing neatly, for raising his hand, for asking safe questions. He learned how to play the game long before he knew it was a game. And he played it well. He got used to being praised for following the rules, so he made it his identity. The system didn't just shape his behavior, it shaped his self-worth, his sense of morality, his entire definition of good. That's why he pushed himself so hard, not because someone told him to, but because his inner script told him that any deviation from the plan was a failure of character. He didn't need a supervisor, he became his own. He didn't need a punishment, because the fear of disappointing others was stronger than any consequence. This is what psychologists call learned compliance, the process of internalizing obedience so deeply you can no longer tell the difference between your thoughts and the thoughts given to you. He thought he was disciplined. He was just conditioned. He thought he was responsible. He was just afraid to step out of line. And here's the most tragic part. No one lied to him. No one tricked him. No one forced him to follow the script. He followed it because it was all he knew. Because breaking the script would mean losing the approval of the people he was taught to live for. It would mean being called selfish, unstable, ungrateful, and so he stayed. Not because he loved the life he built, but because walking away from it would feel like betrayal. To his parents, his teachers, his colleagues, his own children, he wasn't afraid of failure, he was afraid of being misunderstood. Because in a world that worships conformity, the rebel isn't hated, he's erased. That's how control works in the modern age. It doesn't beat you into silence. It convinces you that silence is maturity. It doesn't have to burn your books. It just never teaches you how to read between the lines. It doesn't ban rebellion. It just makes rebellion look foolish, irresponsible, juvenile. And over time, that voice in his head, the one that whispered maybe this isn't right, became quieter, until it sounded like guilt, until it sounded like failure, until it sounded like a threat, because the system had rewired his morality. He no longer asked, "Is this true for me?" He only asked, "Will this disappoint them?" And so he became what La Boétie warned us about, a man who never needed chains. Because the prison had been installed inside his conscience, he enforced his own obedience with pride. He congratulated himself for walking in a straight line, even when the path led nowhere. And this is the danger most men never see. They aren't being oppressed by some external tyrant. They are being guided by a lifetime of subtle programming that told them freedom was selfish and sacrifice was holy. And the worst part? The people who programmed him were not evil. They were just as lost as he was. They passed down the same script because it was the only one they knew. And now here he is, a man who never questioned it. A man who spent his whole life trying to be good, without ever stopping to ask, good for whom? That is where it begins. Not with rebellion, but with the smallest of questions. The one he was never taught to ask, is this me talking, or is it just the system talking through me? But if the system didn't force him, if no one held a gun to his head, then why did he never break away? Why didn't he question it? Why didn't he at least stop even once and ask himself, is this really mine? The answer lies not in laws or leaders. It lies in something far older, far quieter, far more effective, the crowd. In 1895, Gustave Le Bon published a book called The Crowd. He argued something most people still don't understand today, that in groups, we lose our minds, literally. Le Bon wrote that the crowd does not reason, it reacts, it follows, it imitates. In the presence of a crowd, an individual's critical thinking shuts down, and their primitive brain takes over. They stop thinking and start repeating, not because they're weak, but because they're human. He didn't grow up in a dictatorship. He grew up in something more subtle. He grew up surrounded by people who confused repetition for truth and conformity for morality, and so he copied them. He saw what others valued, what they praised, what they posted, what they applauded, and he mirrored it back, not because he believed in it, but because it felt safer than questioning it. In psychology, it's called the bandwagon effect. We assume something is right because enough people act like it is. According to a Gallup poll in 2020, 95% of Americans believe that buying a house is the hallmark of stability. Yet millions drown in debt to meet that expectation. Why? Because everyone else is doing it, and doing it differently feels dangerous. He didn't want to seem unstable, or irresponsible, or weird. He didn't want to stand out, because in a world obsessed with fitting in, being different is seen as a threat. The truth is, society never needed to punish him for thinking differently. It just needed to make him afraid of being alone. And so he became what Laban warned about, a man who followed not out of faith, but out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being left behind, fear of being the only one raising his hand when everyone else was silent. In 1951, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a simple experiment. He asked people to match line lengths on a board. The right answer was obvious. But when everyone else in the room gave the wrong answer, 75% of participants followed along with the group. They chose the wrong answer, rather than stand alone. Think about that. 3 out of 4 people would rather betray their eyes than go against the grain. That was him. That was his life. Not a series of choices, but a series of approvals. What career looks normal? What car feels respectable? What marriage appears functional? What opinion won't stir up trouble at dinner? He shaped himself not based on conviction, but based on what would keep him invisible. Because in the age of mass conformity, silence is a survival strategy. And that's what Laban knew long before social media, before algorithms, before the attention economy. He knew the human need to belong would always be stronger than the need to be free. And he was right. The man never wanted to rebel. He just wanted to be seen as good. Good enough, smart enough, stable enough. He didn't think with his mind. He thought with the crowd's memory. His beliefs weren't his own. They were reflections of whatever got the most applause. He laughed when they laughed. He feared what they feared. He desired what they desired. He was not brainwashed. He was just well-adjusted to a world that rewards those who never ask why. And if you think you're too smart to fall for it, remember this: so did he. On paper, he was a winner. He had the house, he had the family, he had the career, he had the retirement account. He had the respect of his peers. He was the man people nodded at in meetings. The man whose life looked stable, whose choices looked wise, whose path looked complete. He had followed every rule, hit every milestone, avoided every scandal.